out, looking, trying to see what's going on, running out of buildings.
Countless stories recalling what happened inside there. 32 students dead, and perhaps, unfortunately, the number may change again.
It is kind of eerie to look at that, and it was kind of really upsetting to know that he thought like that, and to actually hear that he put together a package, almost a going away package.
April 16, 2007. Students at Norris Hall in Virginia Tech University have begun classes for the day. Unbeknownst to them, just 2 hours earlier, two individuals, Emily Hilscher and Ryan Christopher Clark, would be found shot outside of the West Ambler Johnston Hall dormitories. The university is currently working on figuring out how to inform the students and faculty of the incident, which they believe is an isolated incident. However, what nobody knows is that Virginia Tech student Seung-Hui Cho was behind the initial attacks, and at around 9 a.m. that same day, he'd enter Norris Hall. And what ensued would be one of the most horrifying massacres on a college campus in American history. September 1992. Seung-Hui Cho, born originally in South Korea, immigrated to the United States when he was only 8 years old along with his family. They would first settle in Detroit, Michigan, before moving to Centerville in West Fairfax County, Virginia. Cho was a permanent resident of the United States and was also a South Korean national with a permanent address in Centerville. As a young child, Cho would show signs of strange behavior. His maternal great-aunt, Kim Young-soon, described Cho as being cold, and his family found his behavior concerning. Cho was extremely shy and didn't seem to want to talk to anyone. He was considered well-behaved, though, and would obey verbal commands and cues. Many of Cho's relatives believed that he was mentally ill or mute, and his uncle would claim that Cho didn't speak a lot and didn't really interact with other children. As a child, Cho would attend Poplar Tree Elementary in Chantilly, a section of Fairfax County. Cho apparently finished the school's traditional 3-year program in just a year and a half and was notably good in math and English. He was often touted as an example by his teachers to the other students. At the time Cho was a student, there would only be around 3 Koreans in the school. A friend of Cho's at the time, Kim Jung-won, said that nobody hated Cho and that he was popular with girls. However, Cho would simply keep a distance from others out of preference. Cho would remain in Fairfax County for middle school and high school, attending Stone Middle School in Centerville and Westfield High School in Chantilly. However, things would begin to take a different turn for Cho's life in school. Other students would begin to pick on him and tease him for his shyness and his speech pattern. While in high school, Cho began to refuse to answer questions out loud in school, and at one point a teacher threatened to give him a failing grade for not participating. Cho would then read aloud and other students would begin to laugh, and some had apparently even told him to go back to China. Students at Westfield noted that Cho was subject to frequent bullying from some particular students over the way he spoke English or the way he walked to school alone with his trombone. Rumors began to spread around the school as well that Cho had a hit list and that on the list were names of students that he wanted to kill. However, Cho would eventually graduate from high school in 2003. His parents would try to take him to church, but in the youth group, he was often subject to bullying as well. Cho would eventually go to university, attending Virginia Tech and majoring in English. He would often tell people that he was a business major, however. While a student, he would stay in Suite 2121 in the Harper Hall dormitory with 5 roommates. His behavior would continue to worsen while at college. While attending a poetry class taught by Professor Nikki Giovanni, Cho was eventually removed from the class over his behavior. He would take pictures of the legs of some female students and writing obscene and violent poetry. Giovanni would write a letter to the department head, Lucinda Roy, over the situation, and Cho would be removed from the class. Roy would then alert student affairs, the dean's office, and campus police, but each said that they couldn't do anything since Cho had made no overt threats. Roy described Cho as intelligent, but that he was awkward, lonely, and insecure, refusing to take off his sunglasses indoors, and that his behavior came off as arrogant and obnoxious. His writings were described as being angry. At some point, Roy began to meet with Cho to work with him one-on-one, but she would grow concerned for her safety whenever she met with him. At one point, she even told her assistant that if she said the name of a dead professor, to call security. Roy would also urge Cho to seek counseling, something that he wouldn't end up doing. Cho's roommates noted that he demonstrated repetitive behavior like listening repeatedly to the song Shine by Collective Soul and even writing lyrics all over his dorm room wall. His roommates also noted incidents with Cho, such as one where Cho took photographs of a roommate named Andy Koch late at night, and another where he would continuously call Andy, referring to himself as someone named ? And would say that he was Cho's brother. Cho would also use the name ? when introducing himself to girls that he was allegedly obsessed with. The nickname itself seemed to come from when Cho had been asked his name during a literature class one day, and when he refused to answer, he simply wrote a ? on the sign-in sheet. In the fall of 2005, Cho would tell Koch and another roommate, John Ide, that he had a girlfriend named Jelly and claimed she lived in outer space. Koch and Ida became increasingly uncomfortable with Cho's behavior and eventually began to distance themselves from him and told their friends, especially female classmates, not to visit their room. Cho was also involved in at least 3 stalking incidents, with the first occurring on Sunday, November 27, 2005. After the incident, Cho had allegedly claimed that he had instant messaged the girl online and found out where she lived, and then went to her dorm to see if she was apparently cool, as he claimed. Koch claimed that Cho had apparently seen only promiscuity in her eyes. Cho had also apparently introduced himself to the girl as ? The girl would report the incident to campus police, who gave Cho a verbal warning. He wouldn't contact her afterwards. The final stalking incident occurred on December 13, 2005, when Cho would write a line from Romeo and Juliet on the door of a female friend of Koch. The line stated, quote, "My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself. Had I it written, I would tear the word." The woman contacted campus police and Cho was given a verbal warning. Later on that same day, Cho would text Koch saying, quote, "I might as well off myself now." Koch contacted his father for advice, and then campus police, who escorted Cho to Carilion St. Albans Behavioral Health Center in Radford, Virginia. Cho was temporarily detained for a psychiatric assessment, and he was assumed to be mentally ill and a danger to himself and/or others. He was ordered to undergo outpatient care and was released on December 14, 2005. Many of Cho's writings through the year 2006 would display strange themes of child abuse, murder, and then in one notable incident, he'd written a paper for an intro to short fiction class, and in that story, he wrote about a character who had planned out a mass school murder but did not follow through on the attack. Classmates believed the writings to be morbid and grotesque. A former classmate of Cho's named Ian McFarland said that the plays were, quote, like something out of a nightmare. A senior who had read one of Cho's plays in class had apparently told a roommate that Cho was, quote, the kind of guy who was going to walk into a classroom and start shooting people. Another student named Anna Brown also joked with her friends that Cho was the type who might go on a rampage killing.
Very graphic things. He wrote a play about how his father, there was a character where the father, the son was gonna get back at him by killing him, and it became very brutal and graphic and vulgar with the language. And there was another play about how he was gonna get revenge on a teacher who had given him low marks, and so he just once again lashed out within the play with just very brutal, vulgar language. It was hard to read.
Throughout the months of February and March in 2007, Cho began to purchase firearms. On February 2, 2007, he bought a .22 caliber Walther P22 semi-automatic pistol online. He then bought a second firearm, a 9mm Glock 19 pistol, on March 13, 2007. He was successful in completing both purchases, but failed to disclose that he had been court-ordered to outpatient treatment. On March 22nd, Cho purchased 2 10-round magazines for the Walther through eBay, and then bought more ammunition from Walmart and Dick's Sporting Goods. On that same day, he shows up to a shooting range and would spend an hour practicing, and then apparently videotaped himself inside a van in the parking lot. The next day, he'd purchase more magazines online, and then a few days after that, he bought more ammunition from Walmart. This pattern would continue throughout the month, and then in April, he'd begin filming videos in a Hampton Inn for his eventual manifesto. On April 13, 2007, bomb threats were made to several buildings in the university, and an additional bomb threat was made to the engineering school buildings. It was not clear if they were related to Cho at the time, but police would eventually find a written bomb threat that was similar in Cho's dorm room well after the horrifying incident that was about to take place. Then on April 15th, Cho would call his family in Fairfax County. It's now Monday, April 16th. At around 5 a.m., Joe Aust, a roommate of Cho, noticed that Cho was already awake and at his computer. Another roommate, Karen Gruel, saw Cho getting ready at around 5:30 a.m. Just before 7 a.m., Cho was seen waiting outside an entrance to West Ambler Johnston Hall, and less than 15 minutes later, a girl named Emily Hilscher would be dropped off at her dormitory by her boyfriend, Carl Thornhill. At 7:15 a.m., the first 911 calls would be made reporting that the resident advisor of the dorm, Ryan Christopher Clark, and Emily Hilscher were fatally wounded. Between that time and 9 a.m., Cho returned to his dorm room to reload and would leave a note, commenting about how he believed that the Virginia Tech campus was full of debauchery, rich kids, and deceitful charlatans. At around 7:30 a.m., investigators from the campus police and local Blacksburg Police Department would arrive at the scene of the murders of Hilscher and Clark. Police would initially seek out Hilscher's boyfriend as a person of interest, as a friend of Hilscher told police that he was an avid gun user who attended Radford University at the time. At around 8 a.m., classes would begin on campus, and the Virginia Tech leadership would meet around 25 minutes later to develop a statement to inform of the homicides that had occurred on the campus. Police would also stop and detain Thornhill off campus for questioning. At around 9:01 a.m., Cho would then mail a package to the NBC headquarters in New York full of pictures of him holding weapons. There was also a manifesto that was around 1,800 words detailing his rage, resentment, and a desire to get even. He also included a video that alluded to what he was planning on doing that day on campus. At around 9:05 a.m. to 9:15 a.m., Cho would head to Norris Hall, an engineering building on campus, and would use chains he'd purchased at Home Depot to close the building's entry door shut and prevent anyone from escaping. At around 9:26 a.m., the university would email students, staff, and faculty about the initial shooting that morning, and at around 9:32 a.m., shots were fired in Norris Hall. Police arrived 3 minutes later to find all three entrances chained shut.
Graduate student Jamal Albercuti captured the sounds of gunfire on his cell phone camera.
Gunman David, was he saying anything according to these students?
I don't know about that. I don't know if he was saying anything at all, but I just knew that he came in that one classroom and he was just trying to shoot everybody, and he was going into every single classroom.
From 9:30 a.m. to 9:45 a.m., Cho would carry out his planned attack, shooting 60 people and killing 30 of them. Students in other rooms in the building would begin to barricade their classrooms as the shots continued to fire. In one incident, Cho had attempted to enter a barricaded room and shot twice into it, hitting a podium and then a window.
Sophomore Derek Odell, a biology major, was shot in the arm. He described the scene to NBC's Brian Williams.
He had unloaded probably 8 or 10 shots into people in our class, very tragically. And he reloaded his clip, and nobody could really stop him because we were all hit or scared out of our minds.
Eyewitness Trey Perkins was in German class. He said the gunman made no demands, just started shooting.
I turned a couple desks over to try to get that between us and the shooter. He shot for probably a minute and a half, and after that he left.
At around 9:40 a.m., police would use a shotgun to break through the doors. It had taken them nearly 5 minutes to gain entrance into the building. As they advanced, they could hear the shots firing as they followed the sounds to the second floor. As police reached the second floor, they heard the shots suddenly end and found that Cho had shot himself in the head. High winds related to the April 2007 nor'easter prevented emergency medical services from using helicopters to evacuate the injured, and victims were treated at several hospitals in the region. By the end of the day, at around 7:30 p.m., it would be announced that 31 people were dead in Norris Hall, including the shooter. The official toll would only be confirmed the next day at 9:15 a.m. of 33 people.
Mobilized all our resources, and it didn't seem real. It seemed you would take care of one and another one would roll in.
Well, I can tell you I've seen maybe one gunshot wound at a time.
Yeah, I've never seen the volume. I think it was the volume. And multiple gunshots to each victim in many cases.
5 professors were killed in total. Students across several classrooms were found dead. A survivor of the attack, Aaron Sheehan, told reporters that Cho had peeked into Norris 207, where a German class was held twice, and that Sheehan felt that it was strange that someone would be lost at that point in the semester. Shortly after, Cho had begun shooting, and only 4 students were unscathed by the end, with 2 injured and the rest dead or severely wounded. Classes would be canceled for the remainder of the week, and the next day, a SWAT team would enter a campus building next to Norris Hall in response to a suspicious event. At around 4:37 p.m. that day, local authorities would announce that NBC had received a package from Cho, and the information had been submitted to the FBI. It is believed that the package was timestamped between the first incident at West Ambler Johnson and the second shooting at Norris Hall. In the videos, Cho apparently likened himself to Jesus and expressed a strong hatred for the wealthy. He'd also apparently referenced Columbine shooters Eric and Dylan, calling them martyrs. The Virginia Tech shooting would also take place just 4 days before Columbine's 8-year anniversary. Cho also had denigrated former teachers and made threatening messages to then U.S. President George W. Bush and members of his cabinet. In one of the videos, he went on a rant, effectively stating that he was attempting to get revenge for his alleged mistreatment. He claimed that his death would influence generations of defenseless people. NBC had aired part of the images on the news, but this would upset many who were affected by the incident. Police officials concluded that the package had marginal value in helping them learn and understand why Cho committed the attack, and Dr. Michael Wellner, a man who reviewed the materials, stated that the rantings offered little insight and that Cho attempted to portray himself like a Quentin Tarantino character while he was quiet and meek in real life. Much of the content was not made public, though, as there was allegedly incredibly violent imagery. South Korea, upon learning that a citizen had committed the attack, held a candlelight vigil outside the U.S. Embassy in Seoul and expressed deep condolences. Virginia Tech was placed under scrutiny for its response to the West Ambler Johnston Hall shooting, with many wondering why students hadn't been informed earlier. Some believed that had the university locked down immediately after the first incident, then the Norris Hall attack may have never happened. Police at the time claimed that they believed that the first attack was an isolated incident, as the initial 911 calls reported that the attack was a result of a domestic dispute between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and that when Ryan Christopher Clark intervened, the alleged boyfriend shot both him and Hilscher. However, it was discovered later that Cho had no considerable connection to Hilscher, and it is unclear why he chose to target her. The university would be sued by the families, and a lengthy legal battle would last a few years afterwards, with an initial settlement awarded of $11 million to 24 of the 32 victims' families and 18 people who were injured. The students who were killed were awarded posthumous degrees, and current students were given an option to abbreviate their semester coursework and still receive a grade. The victims were recognized during that year's graduation ceremony as well. Norris Hall would eventually reopen months after the massacre. Although there were considerations to tear the building down, the university determined that it would not be feasible. The rooms were repainted and repaired instead, and the building reopened to allow for students to continue their research in the engineering labs. In 2011, Virginia Tech would be fined a maximum of $55,000 by the Department of Education for its failure to notify students of the initial shooting. The university would appeal the decision, and in 2012, a federal judge overturned the fine, saying that the university's conclusion of assuming the shooting was a domestic incident was reasonable, and that the university's belief that there was no ongoing threat made sense. In 2012, half of the initial fine was reinstated by the education secretary at the time. More fines were levied and paid by the university. In 2012, a jury would find Virginia Tech guilty of negligence for delaying a campus warning. 2 students' families had also filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit. On October 31st, 2013, the Virginia Supreme Court would overturn the wrongful death suit, however, stating that the university was not responsible and that ultimate responsibility rested with Cho for not seeking assistance prior to the attack. To this day, the Virginia Tech Massacre remains one of the deadliest shootings at a college campus on American soil.
And he proceeded to shoot the door, which was wooden. So bullets were hitting the door and almost coming through the door.
The Education Department found that Virginia Tech violated federal law by not moving fast enough to alert students after Seung-Hui Cho shot and killed 2 students in a dormitory on the morning of the deadly rampage.
Though we're rather disappointed in the editorial decision to broadcast these disturbing images.
To be the deadliest campus shooting in U.S. history.